Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a video on the Darksiders series. Now my channel consists mostly of Diablo content, and one thing I love about Darksiders is that it is thematically similar to Diablo. We have demons, angels, Nephilim, heaven, hell. If you like Diablo's story, you'll like the story of Darksiders. And with Darksiders 3 releasing on November 27th, now's a great time to get caught up on the story of Darksiders. So in this video, we'll explore the events of Darksiders 1 and 2. And thanks to THQ Nordic for sponsoring this video. Now, in the universe of Darksiders, an entity known as the Creator made the kingdoms of heaven and hell, whose forces have been at war ever since. Among other races, places, and faces, the Creator also made a neutral third party, the Charred Council, whose purpose was to maintain the balance between the angels of heaven and the demons of hell. Now, at some point, a demoness named Lilith conducted some Frankenstein-esque experiments on the remains of some angels and some demons, fusing them together to create a new species of super being called the Nephilim. Not the Nephilim, the Nephilim. And this triggered some instinctual behavior within angels and demons, awakening some primal desires within them to gaze seductively into the eyes of their fiendish or angelic rivals and make Nephilim babies. So this new race of Nephilim being born, not only were they powerful, but they were also bloodthirsty. And they went on to destroy countless other peoples, places, and personal belongings, all under the leadership of the first Nephilim, Absalom. But 4 of these Nephilim came together, sharing similar thoughts about their brethren. This wanton destruction of everything would eventually undo the balance of creation, which would be bad. So they approached the Charred Council, remember those guys meant to keep the balance, and they made a deal with them. They would become the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, enforcers of balance, in service to the council. Now, while this was happening, a third kingdom arose, humanity, and the forces of heaven and hell immediately began trying to use humanity to gain an edge in their eternal conflict. So the Charred Council had to step in and impose some laws and treaties. You know, lots of red tape, to keep the balance and enforce a truce until the kingdom of man could grow in power and rival the other 2. When the 3 kingdoms would be ready for the final battle, they would break the 7 seals of the apocalypse. And at that point, the truce would be off, and all hell would break loose. And heaven. And human land. Speaking of human land, the Charred Council gave as a place of residence to humanity the realm of Eden. But this upset the Nephilim. We were never given a realm, they said, presumably. So the Nephilim attacked the paradise of Eden, hoping to claim it as their own. Angels from heaven, led by the archangel Abaddon, tried to defend Eden, and that defense may very well have failed if not for the Charred Council deploying the 4 horsemen. Nearly every single Nephilim in existence was killed in this battle, most at the hands of the 4. Absalom, the first Nephilim, faced off against Death, the eldest of the 4, in single combat. Death killed the first Nephilim, but was haunted with guilt over what he had done, killing his own brother. Humanity then relocated to a much less destroyed place, a little world known as Earth. Fast forward to modern-day Earth, and the apocalypse has begun, prematurely, before the kingdom of man was ready. And worst of all, the battlefield for the end days ended up being Earth itself. The youngest of the 4 horsemen, War, the character we control in Darksiders 1, finds himself summoned to Earth, but his fellow horsemen are nowhere in sight. Why was he summoned and not them? Why had the apocalypse begun? What the heaven and hell was going on? War got few answers, but killed lots of angels and demons that were wreaking havoc on Earth. He did learn one thing, though, from the Archangel Abaddon, who was leading heaven's forces. The 7th seal was never broken. Therefore, the apocalypse should never have begun. So why did it? Unfortunately, Abaddon was killed before War could get any further answers. And to make his day even worse, War himself was then defeated on the battlefield and sent back to the Charred Council as a prisoner, accused of being the one to start the apocalypse prematurely and royally screw everything up. War pled innocent, of course, but the council was having none of that. So in a desperate attempt to negotiate his sentence, War struck a deal with the Charred Council, sent him back to Earth to find out who was truly responsible for this. Should he fail, he would die anyway, thus carrying out his sentence. The council agreed and sent War back, but first bound an entity to him known as the Watcher, who would keep War on a short leash and kill him if necessary. When War returned to Earth, he realized that his time imprisoned at the council amounted to 100 years. By now, humanity had been wiped out by the conflict, and Earth had become a barren hellscape. Still the battleground between heaven and hell, but hell had all but won the battle. All that remained of heaven's forces was a scattered resistance. There, War began his quest. Fighting and interrogating angels and demons, he learned of the Destroyer, a powerful demon that had led Hell's forces to victory during the century that War was away. At some point, he was confronted by Uriel, the angel that had come to lead the other angels after Abaddon's death. She blamed War for the death of her master, but she also totally had a crush on Abaddon, so her judgment was kinda compromised. Still, hell hath no fury like a fangirl, so she sent her angels after him, but time and again, War evaded or defeated Uriel's forces. Eventually, War found Azrael, the angel of death, who had been imprisoned by a minion of the Destroyer. War freed Azrael, whose conscience hung heavy with guilt. Azrael confessed to War that before this all began, Abaddon had recruited him for a plot to trigger the apocalypse. It was the angels that were responsible all along. You see, Abaddon believed that heaven would lose in the final conflict if the end war was delayed any further. So the plan was to destroy 6 of the 7 seals, leaving the 7th intact so that the 4 horsemen would not be summoned. But the demons would know that the seals were being broken and would send their champions to investigate. This would allow the forces of heaven to lure the forces of hell into a trap that would destroy hell's most powerful minions in one fell swoop. Meanwhile, heaven had someone reforging the broken seals so that when the Charred Council would come to investigate, they would find no evidence of foul play on the part of the angels, and since the angels would be the only survivors, they would claim that it was the demons that attacked hell prematurely, forcing heaven to defend humanity and defeat the demons. It was a brilliant plan, in principle, but the whole plan fell apart when Abaddon died during the initial assault. Seems the demons were more prepared for heaven's assault than expected. So War was justifiably pissed at this revelation, since he ended up taking the blame for the whole kerfuffle. Learning this, the Watcher ordered War to execute Azrael, but War refused, stating that his mission was over. He was on Earth to figure out who triggered the apocalypse and, well, mission accomplished. But the Watcher reminded War that he was a dog on a leash by tugging on his magical, painful leash. But the Watcher did let Azrael live as long as he remained useful to War's new objective, to defeat the Destroyer in order to maintain the balance. With the help of Azrael, War eventually visited the Tree of Knowledge, where a second major plot twist was revealed to him. He saw a vision of Abaddon being killed, and then taken to a limbo where he was confronted by the demon Lilith. Lilith admitted to Abaddon that she was the one who sabotaged his plan, and she made him an offer: serve in heaven or rule in hell. He could either become her mightiest lieutenant or go back to his regular life. But it wasn't much of a choice, since she pointed out that were he to return to heaven, the truth of what he had done would eventually come out, and he would likely be executed by the Charred Council. So while he was opposed to becoming that which he sought to destroy his whole life, he realized that it was the only way to save his own life and accepted his fate. And so Abaddon became the Destroyer. I don't know if you'd already guessed that part. War's vision also showed him that the Destroyer was guarding the 7th seal and was planning to attack heaven, and that the Charred Council knew about everything this entire time. They knew of Abaddon's plan and wanted to punish him, but apparently didn't have enough proof to justify sending the 4 horsemen, since the seals were all intact. The horsemen would thus see the mission as an assassination, rather than carrying out justice. But the council felt that their power was being threatened, so they couldn't just let things slide. So they summoned War to Earth, setting him up as a scapegoat, knowing that he would do anything to prove his innocence. Oh, and War also sees in his vision his own death. He sees himself taunted by the Watcher, and then fatally stabbed in the back. So that's something to look forward to. War, nevertheless, continues on his path to destroy the Destroyer, now knowing full well that he's been a puppet this whole time. The angel Uriel confronts War once again, but this time she invokes a sacred duel to the death. War beats her, again, but lets her live, and drops a knowledge bomb on her. Abaddon is the Destroyer, and he betrayed his own people. Although War leaves, the duel isn't technically over since neither died. I mean, I'm sure she died a bit on the inside, now knowing how much of a douche her crush turned out to be, but I don't think that counts for purposes of sacred honor duels. War finally tracks down and confronts the Destroyer, who had just finished defeating Uriel and was in the process of taunting her. The Destroyer makes War an offer similar to the one he received from Lilith. Keep working for a corrupt council that betrayed him, or join forces with the Destroyer and rule over all of creation. War basically told him to take his offer and shove it, stating that he won't take the coward's way out like he did. An epic duel ensued, and War killed the Destroyer. War tried then to retrieve the seventh seal, but the Watcher subdued him and took it for himself, in order to prevent War from breaking it and thus summoning the other three horsemen and turning on the council. But then Uriel stabs War in the back, killing him and fulfilling the death oath. She then slashes at the seventh seal in the Watcher's hand, breaking the seal and chopping off his hand like Darth Vader slicing off Luke Skywalker's hand. Oh, I probably should have mentioned that the Watcher is voiced by Mark Hamill. That would have made that reference a lot more poignant. Well, anyway, with the seventh seal broken, War was resurrected, because the summons transcend life and death. Having respawned at full strength, War crushes the Watcher's head in his massive hand, killing him. Uriel and War share a nice little moment of mutual respect, but Uriel warns him that she may be honor-bound to fight him in the near future. She warns him that he will likely be hunted by every powerful entity in the universe at this point if he chooses to go after the Council. She asks, "You would wage this war alone?" And in an absolutely awesomely badass ending to the game, he replies,
"No. Not alone."
And we see 3 fireballs descending from the sky. War's 3 fellow horsemen, Death, Fury, and Strife, heeding the summons. Now that's the story of Darksiders 1. The story of Darksiders 2 actually takes place during the century that War was imprisoned. We follow the story of Death, the eldest and deadliest. Deadly, yeah, that makes sense. Of the horsemen. The Charred Council informed Death and the other 2 horsemen of what War had done, allegedly, as well as his punishment. But Death did not believe his brother to be responsible for the premature apocalypse, knowing him to be the most honorable of the horsemen. So he sought to save War from his fate. And he figured a great way to do that would be to resurrect the human race. If you can erase the crime, then it stands to reason that you should also be able to erase the time. Throughout his quest, Death learned that the key to proving his brother's innocence could be found in the Tree of Life. That's the same tree that gave War those visions that turned out to be pretty damn important. Unfortunately, Death also learned that a corruption was spreading throughout the land and would soon destroy the Tree of Life. And, you know, all the people around there, but they're not important. Death fights his way to the Tree of Life, but as he reaches the entrance, he is seized by corruption and dragged into the tree. A physical embodiment of the corruption taunts Death, asking him what he seeks. And Death explains that he seeks to resurrect humanity in order to save his brother War. The corruption asks Death why he would work so hard to save one of his brothers, while he had no qualm with killing the rest of his brethren, the Nephilim. Death said that he did what he had to do to maintain the balance. And the corruption replied in anger that none of this would have happened if the Nephilim had just been given Eden. It is revealed that the corruption is actually Absalom, the first Nephilim, slain by Death. Remember, I said that a few minutes ago? Absalom's anger and hatred at the betrayal made him live on in some way as the corruption. The Tree of Life then transports Death elsewhere, allowing him to continue his quest. A quest that entailed killing corrupted angels, spirits, constructs, you name it, just all kinds of corrupted stuff. Death learns that to resurrect humanity, he must find the Well of Souls, which has power over life and death. Well, not him, Death the concept, not the person. Death wonders why he'd never heard of this before, and learns that the Charred Council kept this a secret from the four horsemen, in case they ever got the idea of resurrecting their Nephilim brethren. Geez, this charred council sure consists of some stand-up fellas, huh? On his quest, Death runs into Lilith, who introduces herself as his mom. She urges Death to use the well to resurrect his fellow Nephilim, and not to waste it on humanity. Death ultimately makes his way to the well where Absalom awaits. An epic battle ensues, and Death prevails. But not before Absalom pokes at his wounds of guilt some more. With Absalom destroyed, so too was the corruption that plagued the land. Now Death faces the Well of Souls, conflicted about what to do. Does he resurrect humanity or the Nephilim? He learns that whichever race he chooses to save would mean dooming the other forever, and that to activate the well requires a sacrifice. Deciding that he would do anything to protect his little bro, Death decides to save humanity by sacrificing himself to the well, thus bringing life from death. Literally. And so Death's story came to an end, until the seventh seal was broken and the three horsemen were summoned to war's side. Then, in a post-credit scene, we see Lilith getting a stern talking to for not delivering to her master the army she promised. This master is presumably Lucifer himself, the ruler of hell, whom we may just end up facing in Darksiders 3. And this takes us up to, now, Darksiders 3, which takes place chronologically after Darksiders 1 and 2, I suppose. And now you have all the info you need to be caught up on the story of the franchise. In our next video in this three-part series, we'll be exploring more about the gameplay and mechanics of Darksiders, and what about it makes it appealing to action RPG players. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more gaming content.